today I'm going to go over the auto email templates and email group emails. I've talked to a lot of agents recently that aren't using those at all or aren't even sure how they work. And they have the potential for a massive time savings. So I figured now would be a good time to go over those. I'm going to start with auto email templates because those are, I would say, more consistent because you kind of just set them and forget them. So under settings, you're going to want to go to auto email templates. Now, if you don't have an option for auto email templates, that just means they aren't turned on your account. So if you are an owner or an admin user of the system, you can turn those on for your account. If you're an IC and you don't have admin access, you're just going to have to ask your admin to do it for you. And so they're going to go to settings and system settings and then company settings. And then just check this box and click save. And then once you do that, you're going to need to log out and log back in for those settings to take effect. And then once you do that, you'll have access to auto email templates here. So we'll go in here first. And the first thing you want to do is enable them up here. Now, just because you check enable here doesn't mean they're going to automatically go out. So it's even if you're not ready to start using these, you can still enable them because you still have to go on each one and pick and choose which ones you want to enable. So if this is enabled and none of these enable boxes are checked here, it's not going to send anything out. So it's completely fine to enable them. Now, admin users here have the access to edit templates for other agents. If you wanted to set them up for other agents, I could select Lisa and I could set hers up, or I can go back to mine and set mine up. Whatever you want to do. So just go through and you pick and choose which ones you would like to use. Now, if you're kind of nervous about these or you're not sure on these, a great one to start with would be, birthday greetings. Because there's other things that need to be done in order for these to go out because the system looks at criteria in order for it to send these. So for example, the birthday greeting, obviously you have to have the client's email address entered, but you also have to have their date of birth entered. So it's not the end of the world if you forgot to enter a date of birth for one client and it didn't send a happy birthday email. Whereas it is a bigger deal if you were relying on final payment reminders and you forgot to enter something on their trip and it didn't trigger it to send out and you think it's going to send, but it doesn't, and then a final payment is missed. So, if you want to start with that, all you have to do is select the one that you want, enter the subject, enter the body. You can put pictures in there and then check this enable box. Now, if you also check this BCC box, it will send you a copy of the same email that it sends your clients. It's not a true blind copy because the system that we use to send emails can only send an email to one recipient per email. So it can't actually blind copy you on the email it sends the client. But, if you had the client's name in here, like, nickname in here, and it was to Christopher, and it said, happy birthday, Christopher, you would get an email that says, happy birthday, Christopher. That way it went to a client by the name of Christopher. You can also always check under the correspondences tab of the client's profile if you want to see that it went out. So basically, you turn it on and that's it. You don't have to tag it to be sent. It's just going to start sending out clients, their birthday emails on the day of their birthday. Moving up into the ones that are going to have probably more of an impact in your day-to-day use would be things like final payment reminders. This one is very popular because I'm sure you all know it's a pain to, look up and type up an email to each client individually and send them, final payment reminders. So you can have the system do that for you. And again, all you have to do is check this box to turn it on, put in the number of days before the due date you want yours to go out. And this one, you can actually set it up to send two different emails or two of the same email 2 different times. So I've got the first one sending out 14 days prior to the final payment due date. And then I've enabled the additional one to send out 7 days before. That way, if a client, it sends them the one 14 days before and they never respond, they never make a payment, it just sends a follow-up again 7 days later in my case. But you can pick those dates out, whatever you feel works best for you. Maybe 14 days isn't enough notice. Maybe it's, too far out. You want to make it 10 days, totally up to you. And again, you just set up the subject line and the body of the email. Now, if you haven't used these at all, you'll see these funny looking codes here. Those are called merge fields. So at the bottom of every template screen you see throughout the system, you will see those merge fields. These are the available ones that you can use for this particular email. And different emails have different merge fields that you can use. For example, you can't enter a payment balance for a birthday email because that email has nothing to do with anything related to a trip. And for the most part, they're pretty self-explanatory. Now, when you do the greeting, you've got a couple of options. You could do profile name, first name, or nickname. I don't really care for profile name because it's going to be their legal first and last name. So for me, if I received an email and profile name is in here, it would say, hello, Stephen Kelly, which I would venture to guess you probably don't greet your clients with their full first and last name when you email them. If you do first name, it'll just pull their first name from their profile. However, I like to use nickname because if you have a client, let's say me, you've got a Steven that goes by Steve, so you've got Steve entered as his nickname. Because I've entered nickname in here, it's going to greet him, hello, Steve. However, if you have another Steven that goes by Steven and there is no nickname, even though I've told it to use the nickname in here, if there isn't one, it reverts back and uses their first name anyway. So there's really no harm in using the nickname. And then you type it up however you want it. You put in merge fields where you want them to go. And then there's also agent signature. So what this does is it allows the system to insert your email signature that you have entered under settings and agent signature. So you can paste your real email signature in here, and then it'll pop it in at the bottom of that email. And so, again, this one, it'll scan my system every morning. And in this case, it's looking for clients who have a final payment due 14 days from today. And if so, it sends them this email. But it also looks at the status of the trip. So let's say that you have a client whose final payment due date is 14 days from today. But, 2 weeks ago, they reached out and they wanted to, pay off the remaining balance just to get it out of the way. And now their trip is marked as paid in full. It knows not to send to that person because their trip is already paid in full. The same goes, maybe you have a different client whose final payment due date is 14 days from today, but it's, canceled status. Even if they have a balance, if you've marked it as canceled, it knows not to send to that person because it's a canceled booking. So it's pretty smart about knowing when it should or should not send. Now, one other thing to be mindful of, if you want to use this, it's a giant help, but if you're going to use it, you need to make sure that your trips are up to date at all times. For example, if it's canceled, make sure to mark it as canceled so it doesn't send them an email anyway. Also, you need to make sure that the balance is correct in VCRM at all times. So I've seen situations where, let's say the client had a $5,000 balance, and last week they emailed you and said, hey, I want to pay $2,000 of that. Maybe you went and ran their card with the supplier, but you didn't come into VCRM and add that payment to update the balance. And then all of a sudden today it sends them an email showing that they owe the full $5,000. They're going to panic because they know their card was charged $2,000, a couple weeks ago, but now you're telling them they owe the $5,000. Now, obviously, once they email you, you can clear it up, let them know, hey, I just didn't update it in our system. But, you don't want to put that stress on the client, and it makes you look kind of unorganized there. So if you're going to rely on these, you need to make sure that you're adding payments. The balance in VCRM should always match the balance with the supplier at all times. And then also, this invoice URL, this tells the system to send a link to the most recently generated invoice under the client's trip. So again, let's say you made a payment and you recorded the payment, but you didn't generate a new invoice. The balance will show the correct amount, but the invoice might show a previous version from before that payment was made. So there's going to be a mismatch there. So as long as you have an updated balance and an updated invoice generated, you're good to go with this. And, like I said, it'll just send out to your clients automatically. And again, you don't have to tag it to be sent. Every time you add a new booking, it's just going to do it automatically. In fact, pretty much all of these automatically will send, with the exception of one that I'll talk about here, and I'll talk about it now, is the monthly payment reminders. For this one, you can enable it, and basically it will send on the day of the month that their final payment is due every month. So if their final payment is due, November 15th, it's going to send them an email on the 15th of each month. letting them know, here's your monthly payment you need to make. That would be for clients who you want to, arrange monthly payments with them. Now this one, the reason it doesn't just send to everyone is because we had the thought that, if you have a client that doesn't really need to make monthly payments, let's say they're a wealthy client and it's a fairly inexpensive trip, you don't want to make them pay $100 payments for 10 months leading up to it because it's creating more work for you. You got to run their card 10 times or whatever, instead of maybe paying a deposit and then paying the remaining balance off when it's due. So in order for this one to work, other than turning it on here, you also need to go into the client's trip, and there's a checkbox on the trip screen for monthly payment reminder. So that's the only one that requires a second step for it to send these out. All right, and then you've got, upcoming reservation reminders, currently away if you want to check in on the client while they're traveling. This is a good opportunity to, one, make sure everything's going all right, or two, have them tag you in social media posts if they, post about their trip while they're away, just so they can kind of spread the word about your services to their friends and family. Welcome back. If you want to welcome them home, thank them again, tell them you can't wait to plan their next trip, things like that. And then finally, we've got quote follow-up. So this one, I obviously haven't taken the time to enter any verbiage in here, but I do have it turned on. So this is tied into the leads we have in the system. And so I've got it turned on. I've got a 3 in here. So basically, if I mark a lead as quote sent status today, if it's still in quote sent status 3 days from now, it'll send this email to them. So it's basically an auto follow-up for someone who you quoted who hasn't booked yet. Again, if you want to use this, you need to make sure you're keeping up with the status. So if you mark it as quote sent and, 2 days from now they book, mark that as closed so it doesn't send this email, because the client's going to be like, why'd you send me that? I just booked yesterday or whatever. So that's a good way to, keep track of that. So these are where I'd start, and they're great for what they're designed for, but the problem with these is there's a limited amount, and you can't use these for something different than what they're designed for. Like you can't use the welcome back reminder for something totally different because it's only triggered to send when someone returns from a trip. So you're really stuck using it only for that. But there may be other emails that you want to send that are, more customized and on your own schedule that aren't listed in here. Or like, let's take this quote follow-up. You can send it twice, but it's going to send the exact same email twice. Maybe you want to follow up with your clients on the leads, but you want to say something different in the second email than you did from the first. So instead of using this, you could use an email group email for that. So let's go under utilities, and there will be email groups. So these are like customized series of emails that you can apply in bulk to a client's lead or trip or group profile. Those are kind of the 3 main ones. I'll go ahead and go in here. Now let's start with the lead one. So I want to set up my own customized emails to follow up with people when I send them a quote, and I want them to be different than, the same one twice. So I clicked add new email group, and it'll take you to this screen. So first you're going to want to name it something you're going to recognize just from that name. And then the second thing you need to do is select the trigger screen. Now this is confusing for those that haven't used it before. So basically the trigger screen determines 2 things. 1, it determines which screen you can apply these emails to. And 2, it uses which dates you can use to trigger when they are sent. So if it's something related to a lead, you're going to want to select lead as a trigger screen. If you're doing it at a trip level, you need to make sure to select trip. Or if you want to do it at a group profile level, if you book groups, it'll be under group profile. And you'll notice you can't change this after the fact. So you're stuck with what you get. So if you ignore this and select the wrong thing and go on and add a bunch of emails, and then you find out you did the wrong screen, you got to start over basically. So be mindful of that. Finally, you can also share these with other agents. So if you have an agency and there's 10 of you there, and you take the time to create a series of emails, for something, and you want to share those with everyone else on the team, you just check this box. If they're very customized and they won't really work for other people anyway, just don't, leave that box unchecked so only you have access to those. And then once you create the email group itself, then you're going to move on to the email tasks. So I've already got 3 in here. So the first one is my follow-up email number 1. So basically I said, checking in for the subject, and I'm just basically saying, hey client, did you have any questions about the quote I sent you yesterday? And then I've selected a trigger. I want that to be triggered based off of the date that I changed it to quote sent status 1 day after. And then I did a second one, follow-up number 2, same thing, but the trigger is the date I changed it to quote sent status 4 days after. And so this one, it's kind of just, me saying, hey, again, do you have any questions? Is there anything I can do for you? And then finally, I have a third one, which is like the final, where I basically say, hey, client, I'm not going to bug you anymore. I'm here if you want me, to help you plan this trip. But for now, I'm going to close your file or whatever you want to say. So that allows you to create kind of a series of emails that are different one from the next. Now, the most popular area that I see people using these would be at a trip level. Now, you can set these up however you want. You can kind of break them down however you want. Personally, I think it works best to do it by destination, or if you're booking cruises, probably by cruise line. So I've got a bunch of test stuff in here, but you can see I've got ones for Disney, I've got some for Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Mexico, and so on. So let's use Jamaica as an example because I actually have quite a few in there. So here again, I've entered it. You got to name it something you're going to recognize, and then for the trigger screen, I've selected trip this time. And then once I get that created, I just go into my task. This is where I set up my email. So most of what I have in here is specific to Jamaica. Now, there may be some emails that you use across the board. They're generic enough. It doesn't matter whether they're traveling to Mexico or Jamaica or wherever. The email is the same. And for that, you can copy, from other groups. So if I had a generic, check into your flights or, something like that, I could copy that from another group into my Jamaica group so I don't have to retype it from scratch again. Or if I want to type it from scratch, I just add new task. So the first thing here I've got is Club Mobe. It's a great service. It's commissionable. I know it doesn't pay a ton of commission compared to, an entire booking. So I know a lot of agents don't take the time to offer things like that because it's time consuming. You've got other, clients to work with. So if that's the case, why not create an automated email that goes out for you so you don't have to take the time to offer it to them? The system will do it for you. So I just put in, some basic information, a couple pictures. Here's what you get with the arrival. Here's what you get the departure. Now in here, there's this merge field for 60 before trip date. This is great to use for things like deadlines or when something can happen, like Disney agents use it a lot for dining, because when you put that in, the client will see whatever date equals, in this case, 60 days before the trip date. But you can change that number to like a 40 or a 10 or a 100. Whatever number you put in there, it'll subtract that many days from the client's trip date and enter whatever date that equals. So in this case, Club Mobe can sell out. So I put a deadline, you need to book this by whatever date is 60 days before their trip. And then I've said, let's send that out 80 days before the trip date. Now, another thing you can also do is check this box so it defaults to weekdays only. So if 80 days before the trip date lands on a Saturday or Sunday, it'll send the Friday before. And while we're on this screen, this checkbox is nice. Let's say that I have a link in here where they can book directly, through me, but directly without having to even email me. And let's say I apply this email to every single trip I book to Jamaica. And at any given time, let's say I have, 40 trips going to Jamaica. So this email is pending somewhere in my account 40 times. And then all of a sudden, let's say that link changes. So now the link that I have in there is not valid anymore. What I can do is I can come in here and update it with the correct link. But before I click save, I check this box, and it'll basically, after I check this box and save it, it'll update that link in all 40 of those pending trips I have that I applied, months ago. So those clients get the correct link, even though I changed it after I applied it. So that's what that is for. And then this button, let's say you have an idea for a new email that you want to add to this series. And again, you have 40 emails pending at any given time. If you add a new email into this email group and you check or you click this button, it'll apply this new email to those other 40 that you applied months ago. So that's what that is for. You go in and you can have, several. You can do one for excursions. Those two are obviously add-ons to hopefully bring you more sales or add-on sales for each trip. But you can use it for pretty much anything you want. Like I've even got a recipe in here for jerk chicken for Jamaica, which, obviously is cliched. But this isn't going to make you any money, but it's fun to get excited with your client leading up to their trip. So why not create something fun like this? Send it out to them 40 days for a trip, 20 days, whatever, kind of get them in the spirit of things, get excited about their trip. You can do information on specific resorts. If you sell a lot of go-to resorts, for like secrets here, you could do like a map of the property, on-property activities, links to that, pre-book spa appointments, things like that you can send out. You can do last-minute info you want to send prior to their trip. A lot of agents will do like a pack list or, things like that. Don't forget these items. If there's like customs forms they can fill out online ahead of time, you can include things like that in there. Really whatever you want. And you can base it on the trip date, the created date. So if you need to send something shortly after a trip was booked, you could use created date as a trigger. You can do final payment due date, or you can even do return date. So if you want to send something shortly after they return, you could do, 5 days after the return date. So you put all these in here one time, and now every time you book a trip, let's go to a trip in here. Let's see, we'll use this one. All right, so here's a trip to Jamaica traveling in October, and I want to apply that series of emails. So I click apply email group. I select my Jamaica one. This is why you want to name it something you're going to recognize, because you need to know what is what. So Jamaica trip emails. And then also when you name the email task, name it something you're going to recognize. I see a lot of agents will, be like email 1, email 2, email 3, and they have no clue what it is. They have to click into each one to see. So if you name it like this, you'll know. So let's say this client is going to secrets. I wouldn't want to send them info on couples resorts, so we're going to ignore those two. They don't need an itinerary, and they already booked excursions, we'll say. So we're going to ignore those 4. Let's keep the other 4 here. And then you have this column here. So, do you want to copy additional attendees on the email? So if I turn this off, it's only going to send this email to the lead person on the trip. If you turn it on, it's going to go to everyone on the trip, assuming you have everyone's email addresses entered under their profiles. But, let's say it's a family vacation. You're only in contact with one person anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn these off. And we're going to, check these dates. They're all in the future. We're good to go. We'll click apply. And so now, here they are. It's going to send these emails out on these dates. Now, you can further customize them after the fact if you want to. Like, maybe you want to add an extra sentence or two for this particular client. You can click edit, and you can change, add an extra sentence that you normally wouldn't send to other clients that you want to send to this one. Or you could even change the send date. Like, let's say, I'm really weird about what day of the week I send emails if I feel like they're important, because I feel like people pay less attention on Mondays and Fridays. So, even though I said don't send on weekends, this lands on a Friday, which I don't really like that. So let's back it up and send it the Tuesday before instead. And we'll go ahead and click save. And so now it'll send out on Tuesday instead of Friday. And let's say sometime between now and July 22nd, the client actually comes to me and says, hey, I want to book Club Mobe. A friend of mine told me about it. And you get this knocked out and taken care of well before this date. You no longer need this email. You simply just delete it, and then it won't send. Or if you need to delete multiple, you can check these boxes, or you can, select all and then delete selected. Now, if you cancel a trip, it'll also prompt you, like, do you want to remove any pending custom emails? You can just click yes, it'll do that for you. But if they're still going and for some reason you don't want to send those, just, come down here to the pending custom emails and delete them from there. Now, sometimes when you apply them, you'll have where it says the date, you'll have an issue. So like this is the lead here, it's initial contact. So let's say apply email group, that one I showed you earlier, the quote follow-up ones, you'll have something like this. And what that generally means is it doesn't have a date to set the trigger. And the reason in this case is because my trigger is when I change the status to quote sent X amount of days after. and I haven't changed it to quote sent. So, sometimes it can be, if you did it at a trip level like that Jamaica one I just did, but you didn't enter a trip date, and then you go to apply emails that are using the trip date as a trigger, the same thing will kind of happen there. So what I need to do is I need to change it to quote sent status. And then when the page reloads, I'll go ahead and go in here and try again. And now, one day after is tomorrow, so the 19th. 4 days later is the 22nd, and 7 days after is the 25th. So now if I apply them, it'll send on these dates. So keep that in mind. And then the last one I'll go over is at a group level. So you can always, even if you book groups, so in this group I have 2 different trips. I have Alan and then myself. So I could go into each of these trips and apply a series of emails and send it that way. But if you have a group with 40 rooms, you're going to have to go in there and apply 40 different email groups on 40 different trips. Now, the benefit to doing it that way at a trip level is, let's use that Club Mobe one as an example. If Alan books Club Mobe ahead of time, you could cancel that email from sending out to him on his trip, but it'll still send to me because I didn't touch my trip. Whereas if you do it at a group level, if you apply these emails at a group level, it sends to everyone in the group. So if you do that, you have to use verbiage like, if you haven't already done so, here's this. That way they know, okay, this doesn't apply to me because I already did that. All right, so let's go in and let's show a sample of a group level email group. So, and again, you can do it by group and Jamaica or group and Mexico, or you could just do generic group. So I'm going to do group Jamaica here. And some of these I reused from the trip level, like the Club Mobe and the excursions and the recipe and the things to know. All of that's the same. I just apply it one time at the group profile level, and it's going to send those emails out to everyone in the group. However, I've also got these flight requests. So if you haven't used the flight collector form, if you book groups and you don't book air for your groups, oftentimes the group contract includes transportation. So there's kind of a disconnect there. You need your clients to send you their air. So we have this button where you can, send an air collector form to the client for them to fill out to send you their flight details. And then it will track down here flights linked to group. So I have already submitted mine, so I have green check marks, but Alan hasn't. So in this example, I could send that to Alan as a link for him to fill it out. But that's just kind of a manually done process. You're clicking it, clicking send to Alan, submitting it, and then you wait for him to submit it. But you can also do that in an automated way with an email group. We'll go back to that email group. So I've got 3 of them because I know clients won't all pay attention to the first email. So the first one I've got set to send 90 days before the group trip date. I'm just making updates here, but so here I typed an email that says, please submit your flight information, nice and polite, and I included this merge field for group form URL. That will send the client a link that they can click on to submit their flights to you. And you also want to make sure to check this box when you're using it for the air, because this basically says only send this to people who haven't submitted their flights. So in the example where I've already submitted mine, I won't receive this email, but Alan will because he hasn't submitted his flights. I sent that, and let's say you have a group with, again, 40 rooms. It sends this out to everyone. Let's say half of them respond and fill out that form. So now on the group profile, you've got, half have green check marks, half have the red X. You can set a second one to send out 20 days later, where it's pretty much the same, except I passively aggressively wrote second request in the subject line. And then all of this is pretty much the same. Again, send them this, check this box down here so it only sends to those other 20 that haven't submitted their air. And, it sends in. Then let's say of those 20, 10 of those respond to that one and submit their air. So now you've got 10 left that haven't, so I've got a final one, where this is where I, kind of get a little bit more aggressive, start using red font, where I basically say, hey, you need to submit your air within 48 hours. If not, you're not guaranteed transportation. And, put final request in the subject. And then again, check this box so it'll only send to those 10. So that's a great way to save yourself the time and headache of having to manually email individual clients about their air. And so once you have that set up, you go into the group profile and go to the top, click apply email group, and select your group Jamaica emails. Again, you can ignore any that don't apply. Now these, it will only send to clients if their trip that is linked to that group is one of these statuses here. So on request, awaiting deposit, deposited, paid in full, or traveled. So originally we didn't have that filter in there, so it was sending to everyone. But what we found was a lot of agents like to leave people in the group if they canceled their status or it expired, they never deposited on it. But they didn't want those emails to go out to those people. So now it looks at the status and it's only going to send if they're one of those, I think, 4 statuses. If it's expired like this, it's not going to go to Alan, it's just going to go to me. Whereas, or if it's canceled, it won't go to them. So it's pretty good about knowing which people to send the email to and which ones not. And like I said, this is, the other side of that. When you apply to a trip level, it allows you for more customization, meaning that you can delete specific emails for specific clients. Whereas this is a lot faster because you don't need to go into 40 trips and apply it. You apply it one time and it sends to everyone on this. But that's really all I had for today. Does anyone have any general questions about this? Yeah, folks, go ahead. You can unmute or you can type it. It's wherever you want. Okay, so you guys, can you get a copy of the recording? Yeah, so I'm going to upload this to YouTube as soon as I get a copy of it. And you can watch it on there or do what you need to do from there with it. So if I see you have your hand up still on here, if you can't unmute, just type it in the chat, or it's up to you, whichever way works better. Or anyone else, if you want to jump in if you have questions, go ahead. No, a quiet bunch today. All right. Well, thank you all for your time. If you do think of any other questions, you feel free to reach out to me, Stephen, STEPHEN at VacationCRM.com. I'll be glad to answer your questions. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.